Michelle! Oh, you left me again. No.
What?
No. Can I say hi?
Go ahead. All right, quiet. Man, that was good. You guys are good. All right, where are we? Okay, so here we go. We're moving into the last section, which is not the scientists now, but more the philosophers. We're still in the Enlightenment. Now, how can you think of this? How can you think of this? This is very important. William, this is very important. If everybody from Copernicus to Newton discovered scientific things that contradicted what the church had been teaching for over 1,000 years, those contradictions of the natural scientific world were like the rocks that were falling into the water. The ripples that started happening when people started thinking about what that means about more stuff than just the natural world. The ripples from the scientific discoveries about questions of morality, good and evil, and questions of truth and knowledge and things like that. Those are the ripples that came, and that's what we're going to cover now. All right? People started thinking about the clockwork universe and started saying, okay, now what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? So who are we going to start with? We're going to start with who? What was it?
Pascal.
Pascal. Okay, Pascal in a nutshell. Pascal is just an example. You don't really need to go into him too much. Except, why is he important? Because he was A, a mathematician, but B, a very religious man and a philosopher. And Pascal is our person in history who best expressed in his writings. Who best expressed in his writings the troubled minds of devout Christian believers who understood the science and said, oh my God, all this is true. And so everything that I was raised believing from the church, from the authorities, is suddenly being threatened. And this scares me. So Pascal is the person who recorded most eloquently, most movingly, most beautifully how scary Europe felt at that time, because man was no longer the center of the universe. Science had shown us that. Because God was no longer the explanation for the stars in the sky and everything else. That the Bible was not always right. And so Pascal is the one who said, oh my God, we're not God's favorite creature. We are more like insects in a universe that's infinite. And that's scary. What's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of life? It all seems empty now. Sure, the Enlightenment has shown us evidence and proof, and it's explained everything very clearly. Pico said we can become higher than angels, and Newton took us higher than angels because he explained the heavens far better than angels ever could. But Pascal was the one who was like, but what does that mean? We are that unimportant? We're just born, we live, and we die? Is that it? We're in an empty universe? God's no longer there? So that's Pascal. He is the one whose writings best express the fear.
So we could use him as the morality.
He can be used in a lot of ways, sure. So let's get past Pascal now, because he is just the person who is like, again, oh my God, this means so much more than that mathematics explains the universe. This means a lot about God and man and truth and other things and life after death and everything else. And now it's scary. Now it's scary. Because if the universe is empty, what does that mean about the meaning of life? Okay? And other people were less scared about it and just were more comfortable and started thinking about what it means.
Chaos between religious beliefs and new discovered science.
Because of the chaos?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't really chaos. It was the opposite. It was enlightenment.
No. Like, he explains that, like, what is the meaning of life, right? Like, how the Europeans were scared of new discovery.
He explained that the traditional meaning of life was no longer very persuasive because it was challenged by too many things. It was hard to trust everything that was being taught by the church. He understood that. He was a mathematician. And so he understood that it was scary now, because all of the old explanations about us and God and life after death and everything else were harder to believe in. because he knew math. He couldn't deny the math was true. Newton was right. So after Pascal, people started saying this. Well, if everything the church has been telling us is true for over 1,000 years, has been shown by science in so many ways, not every single way, mind you. These people, many of them are still Christians. If everything that the church has been telling us, so many of them are untrue, then how do we know anything? How do we really know truth? Because authority used to be our source. The Pope, the priest, somebody like that. But they've been proven wrong too many times. So how do we really know anything? How do we really know anything? And that was the big question. We got to find a new authority. Okay, Sarah, this is for you.
Where is Sarah?
Sarah,
Sorry.
J. John.
Yeah, Sarah. There's two Sarahs.
she left.
Sarah Jump.
She left.
Because we're going over time. Deductive logic, that was the old way. What is deductive logic? It is where you assume one thing is true.
What?
Two ways of seeking truth, of defining truth. One is deductive. Deductive is the first one. Deductive is, I'm going to start with this. I'm going to assume this is true. And everything else follows from that. Everything else is true based on this one thing that we can't prove, but we accept that it's true. For example, the Bible is true. Every word in the Bible is true. If I take that as my basic truth, then every truth, anything that goes against the Bible is not true. This is hard. What's another deductive truth? Okay,
Is it same as deductive in math?
sort of. How about this one? It's a famous one, syllogisms. All men are mortal. All men die. Is that true?
Yeah.
All men die.
Yeah.
Are we absolutely sure?
Yeah.
Okay. And Socrates is a man. Is that true?
Yeah.
Therefore, Socrates will die. Deductive logic. We start with this basic truth. All men are mortal. That's true. Now, what if we discover one man who has never died? He's 3,000 years old.
Whoa.
What does that do to that deductive logic?
Make it false.
Oh my God. Okay, so in the same way, all of those truths, the Earth is the center of the universe, that was the starting point. Therefore, all the other planets have wacky mathematical explanations, because of course it's true that the Earth is the center of the universe. Deductive logic. That was the old way of getting truth. Some authority tells us the basics, and then we get everything else that's true from those basics. So this is the traditional way. It's based on authority, or on what seems like common sense. The sun rises and sets. Therefore, the sun goes around the earth. The sun rises and sets. Therefore, the sun moves and the earth doesn't, right? Traditional ways. Either from authority or from just what seems like common sense. It seems like common sense that all men die. But what if science comes up with a way to keep us alive forever? Through genetic engineering or something like that. Cloning and all that, it's happening. Stem cell research, it's happening. Well, whatever. We could go off on this. I love these concepts. Okay, inductive reasoning. Inductive logic. It is the opposite of deductive. It says, I'm not going to assume anything is true. I'm not even going to assume that all men are mortal. Because I don't know. How can I know? I can go around the world and ask every single person in the world if there's anybody older than 100 years old that you know. And if everybody in the world that I ask, if I take a poll of every single person in the world, do you know? And if they all say no, then I have 6 billion pieces of evidence that this is true. 6 billion pieces of evidence. And from those 6 billion observed pieces of evidence, I induce the truth. All men do die. That's my conclusion now. So I go from specifics to a general truth. Deductive, you go from a general truth, all men are mortal, to a specific truth. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Inductive, you observe, gather evidence, and then you think about it, and you get a general truth from it.
That's more logical.
Inductive is more logical, and that's the scientific way. We don't know the truth. We look, we observe, we ask questions, and we gather evidence. And then we draw conclusions from what the evidence shows us. That's the scientific method, okay? And that really starts happening in the Enlightenment. How do we know anything? Deductive logic, based on the truths of authority, no longer holds water. It's leaky. It's leaky. We can't trust it anymore. So we've got to start from scratch, assume we know nothing, and start asking questions and observing things. How do we know? Inductive is the new way. Descartes is one of the people who started saying, how do we know? His answer, if I can observe it inductively and mathematically prove it rationally, and the equation works and blah, 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 then that's truth. How do we know truth? By observation and mathematics. But where does that leave the soul? Again, Pascal, oh my God, if none of this, if so much of the Bible is untrue, is there a soul? Is there a soul? The soul's the thing that still lives after we die. Oh, is there a soul?
Karma.
Yes, it's in South Korea. Inductively, it's right there. I observe it. No, is there a, not soul, is there a soul?
Soul.
Is there a thing in us that lives when our body dies? You can't put a soul in a test tube. Body dies, you don't find a soul, you don't see it floating out of the body into the sky. Oh my God, and these are the things that Pascal was like really sensitive to. And Descartes was too. And Descartes refused to think that anything had a soul because it couldn't be proven. You can't see it, and you can't prove it mathematically. But what he did do was a funny little, but very major work. Where he tried to logically prove God and the soul. I think. That's my,
Oh, I have that.
therefore, I am.
Oh.
There's thinking going on up here. That's not natural, material, something you can put in a test tube. My thinking, you can't put, and yours either, if you're thinking right now. Dreams. You can't put a dream in a test tube, but we experience those, right? So there are these things of spirit or something that Descartes wanted to say.
Or I am.
I think, therefore I exist. I being the soul. Other people have criticized and said, all you're proving is that the mind exists.
Is that deductive or inductive?
Well, can you inductively prove right now that you think? Do you have a thought in your head?
Yeah.
There it is. You have evidence. You have evidence that thinking exists. And it's your thinking, therefore you think, therefore you are. Hey everybody, aren't you relieved? You think, therefore you exist.
Yes! Yay!
John's excited by it. John, if you don't think,
I died.
Are you already dead?
all right. And, well, so Descartes was trying to defend the idea of God by saying there are some things that don't fit in a test tube, like thinking. Thinking is evidence, scientifically, of something more than matter, physical stuff. And if there's more than physical stuff, that means that the soul is possible. and God is possible, and other things are possible. Because we don't want to let go of the idea of a God, of something to give life meaning. So we've got to try to think of it in new ways. I don't like Descartes for this reason. He said that animals don't have souls. So mean. And if anybody's read Lauren's blog, Julia's blog,
Oh my God.
I did that on purpose. No, I didn't. If anybody's read Julia's blog about the poor cows
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I saw.
and how the cows are being just tortured.
I know.
It's based on all the beef that you eat is raised in cows in a cow factory. They sit, haven't you seen it? They sit in these
I
little,
saw it on the documentary.
they don't even have room to lay down and sleep. They're always standing. They are not allowed to move. They're in factories. They're in big buildings, like aluminum buildings, in little stalls, little pens, and
And
kept
the
there.
and peas are like all over.
24/7, standing in one place, pooping and peeing, with machines connected to their udders, taking their milk, and they don't walk around, and they don't get to eat grass.
Their food is all like dog food, like.
And the poor things. Oh, but they don't have souls. So who cares about animals? That's one reason I don't like Descartes. Again, my dog dreams. Therefore, my dog exists.
What was your dog's name?
Fritz.
Aww.
Your dog died?
It's one of the saddest stories of my life. Okay. Okay, so that's Descartes. Who do we have next?
Montaigne.
We skipped
What about Bruno?
Lock, ops.
Okay, Bruno. Bruno, just real quickly, Bruno was the guy who thought about Galileo's discovery. And to me, he's like the first science fiction thinker. Maybe there's life on other planets. Maybe there are alien civilizations. And he got burned at the stake by the Catholic Church. The Inquisition burned him to death.
Because he touched other.
Because he started saying, well, if the planets, the heavenly bodies are actually planets with moons, then they're like Earth. And if they're like Earth, then maybe there's life on them.
Wait, what is heliocentrism?
Helio means sun. Centrism means center. So the sun-centered universe, that's Copernicus. Helio means sun. Heliocentric universe. Geocentric universe. Geo means Earth. Geology, geography. Gaia. Geo, Gaia. So where are we going?
Aristotle's four elements and Montaigne.
Medieval worldview. Christian matrix. Church teachings. The four elements in ether. That's Aristotle.
How about Hobbes and Locke?
Montaigne, Hobbes.
Montaigne.
Did we ever talk about this? Yeah, we talked about them a lot. Yeah.
Real quickly, Montaigne. Again, this one's kind of different. Not only the scientific discoveries of just facts seen through telescopes caused ripples in the way we start thinking about everything that we thought we knew before. Our relation to God, our relation to the church, what the church says, what the Bible says, blah, 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 blah. Headbutt. But also the age of exploration here. And this is where Montaigne is different, because Montaigne starts thinking about multiculturalism. There are other civilizations out there. Aztecs, Incas, Chinese, Indians. And for the first time, Europe, which is like North Korea until this point, no contact with the rest of the world. Europeans didn't know anything about China or anything else until the age of exploration. And when these people start writing about what they saw of these other civilizations, Montaigne starts thinking about it.
So he's the start of age of exploration.
No, he's the person who's, the age of exploration starts ripples in his thinking about the world and about morality especially.
Oh.
Good and evil. What I'm writing here is multiculturalism, or what we can also call cultural. The opposite of absolutism? Relativism. My kingdom for a good freaking pin.
tomorrow?
I do that.
Caught on tape, great.
I do that a lot.
What do you do?
He tripped. Almost tripped.
Yeah, it's better. Cultural relativism. If the Ten Commandments say that all these things are God's word about what's good and what's evil, and the Aztecs have a different God with different commandments about what's good and evil, and Montaigne has read reports of civilizations in the New World and in Asia, Hindus, Buddhists, Taoists, Koreans, Japanese, none of them Christian. All of them, though, with their own moral viewpoints, their own sort of moral beliefs about what's right and what's wrong. Montaigne is one of the first to think about all that and say, maybe morality is relative to where you were born, what culture, what civilization. Because different cultures have different moral beliefs. And what makes ours, Europe's, the only right one, and all the rest of them wrong? It's relative. It relates to where you are and what you were taught, what civilization you grew up in. They're all right in their own way, and none of them are more right than any other. Or I guess more true. We can talk about whether they're more right. A civilization that has slavery, is that better than a civilization that doesn't? We could talk about whether it's more right.
Isn't relativism the one that we do on the backwards earth?
Relativism is a general idea that there's not only one way to look at something. It relates to your point of view. So when the earth was flat, there was only one up. When the earth was round, suddenly up is relative to where you're standing. There's no absolute up anymore. There's no absolute right and wrong anymore. It's relative to what country or civilization you're standing in. Multiculturalism. He was very modern in that way. I mean, are you going to go to China and tell all the Chinese that they're wrong for not believing the same way Korea does? You're going to go to India and tell all the Indians that they're wrong for not believing the way Koreans do? You're going to go to Mars and tell them that they're wrong for not believing the way that Earthlings do?
What about North Korea?
You're going to go to Korea, North Korea, and
We do tell them that they're wrong.
You'll be dead.
Okay, now remember, Descartes wanted to keep the soul. The soul is of course something that's separate from the body, isn't it? Isn't it? According to traditional thinking? The body dies, what happens to the soul according to traditional teaching? It goes to heaven, therefore it's something separate. It doesn't depend on the body. Bodies are like physical things that somehow have this separate thing inside of them called a soul. And the soul lives forever, but the body doesn't, according to traditional thinking. And because of the Garden of Eden story and the morality laid out in the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible, sex is bad, sex is wrong, the body is an enemy. The body's an enemy. It tempts you. It tempts you to do sinful things. Well, Montaigne looked at that and said, wait a minute. Why are we calling our body the enemy when we have no evidence for the soul? If the body's not our enemy, but is instead natural, and if everything is natural, then the body is natural. It's not evil, it's not bad, it's not sinful. It can be abused, but we really have to ask if there's no soul, and we're just minds and bodies, then is it possibly silly to define everything having to do with the body as sin and as the enemy? That's Montaigne's start. So it's okay to enjoy good food, which church preaches against, or used to. It's okay to enjoy anything that feels good, as long as you are not stupid. Because you still have to be philosophical about it. You still have to be wise. He's not saying, okay, now we can all be alcoholics, woohoo!